Good afternoon. I'm Tom Cary. I am Lavern Cary's nephew, and more than that, I am Lavern Cary's favorite nephew. And if you dispute that, well, that's just too bad. I have the microphone. Uncle Lavern was my mother's twin brother. Her name is Laverna, and in case you need more evidence that the birth of twins was a surprise to my grandparents, I give you the names Lavern and Lavern. When we were young, Lavern was a hard name to pronounce, so Lavern became Uncle Lavern, and then simply Uncle Bern, and it was funny because fireman. I once introduced Uncle Lavern to a woman as my mother's twin brother.
Wow.
This is very important, as my mother's twin brother. And she asked, "Oh, are you identical twins?" And Lavern paused as if considering this for the very first time. And he replied, "Well, no, I have a penis." Now, I believe that my uncle was able to deliver this line many times over the course of his long life. And he did it with such skill and with such kindness that even the woman who was the butt of the joke had to laugh. Cutting sarcasm that doesn't cut, nothing is more Cary than that. And Lavern was a master practitioner. My mother, Lavern's twin, still lives. She's the last of the siblings alive. Infirmity and dementia have prevented her from being here today. And late in Lavern's life, he too suffered from dementia, and he would count himself as fortunate that he suffered for a relatively short time. Dementia is a thief, robbing you of the context of your own life. It seems that it is the context that makes a man who he is. Those connections with your family, with the things you've done and the people you've encountered throughout your life. I am who I am in part because of my relationship with my uncle, and my children are too, and so on and so on. So I guess in the end, the context is still there. Even though he could no longer recall it, it remained, and it became our job to carry it for him in the stories, in the memories and things that he taught us. And so, it will remain today. My niece Tessa recently summed it up well. She was writing about the movie Coco, and she wrote, "In the movie, if you were forgotten, you were gone forever. It's a terribly upsetting thought, the world forgetting someone who meant so much to you. But I was so happy to think that in my family, no one is ever forgotten. There are stories and pictures and songs that continue on down our family tree for years and years to come. I'm so lucky that our great-grandparents and grandparents and parents helped us understand and believe in the importance of family and tradition. I can't wait to teach my children the same. That as a Cary, we sing before dinner. Olives are an appetizer. In-laws are outlaws. Game nights keep us together, and movie trips make us friends. A second cousin is a cousin, and a cousin is a brother or a sister. A first cousin once removed is a cousin and an aunt and a mom, and your baby is my baby, and your uncle is my uncle, and the neighbor down the street is our family, and your friend from college brings the bread." So today, we are all family. Welcome to the crazy, mixed up, wonderful Cary family. So now I would like to call on Lavern's eldest daughter, Diane.
Thank you so much for coming today and celebrating our dad's life.
our dad, our uncle, or, you know, what he just said. And that you can all be part of our family. It's so fun for me. I live in Indiana, and so I miss a lot of the family stuff that goes on. And I miss seeing people as they go through life and get married and have kids. And so it's been so much fun today to see a lot of you today. Our dad was born on a farm along with his twin sister Lavern in Grant, Nebraska, December 1st, 1932, to Wilbur and Maddie Stewart Cary. Losing that farm to the Dust Bowl, they migrated to Idaho in 1936 and then to the country surrounding Corvallis in 1937. They raised 5 children, really interesting names: Nelma, Orville, Lavern and Laverna, and Frank. In austerity, exemplifying characteristic ingenuity, self-sufficiency, and the value of family and community. Dad often told us the story of his mom making biscuits and paste gravy for dinner. He thought they were eating like kings. It was only when he was older that he realized that was what she made when the only ingredients on hand were flour and bacon grease. Dad graduated from Corvallis High School in 1950, where he met his first wife, our mother Joanne Jones. They soon married and started their family of 5 children. He told the story of there being only 2 weeks in 9 years that they didn't rinse out a pail of diapers each night. He was great at caring for their babies, feeding, changing, bathing, disciplining, and helped carry the chore load around the house. We did a lot of weekend camping when youngsters. Leave Friday after work for the mountains, enjoy the weekend, return Sunday evening, unpack, clean off red volcanic dust, buy new supplies, do laundry, repack, repeat. It was the labor of love that built many memories. Later we went to Payette Lake in Idaho. Dad's twin sister Laverna's family and his brother Orville's family were the regulars. We rented cottages and big cabins. Then Orville and Lavanna bought their own. Summers of boating, fishing, skiing, playing spoons and pit, hikes and picnics. We forged friendships with our cousins that were reforged every Thanksgiving with the larger Cary clan here in Corvallis. Years after Dad and Mom bought a share in a condo at Otter Crest on the coast, where so many of us spent vacations and had our honeymoons. Great times. One of Dad's favorite sayings was, "No plans, no disappointments." Being a Dust Bowl baby, Dad knew what disappointed plans looked like. He drilled his mantra into us, especially on vacation. "Can we get ice cream at the lake today?" No plans, no disappointments. He usually had his own plan that turned out to be pretty good. About a year ago, Steve wanted to see how Dad's memory was. He figured the mantra was a good place to start. "Dad, do you remember the saying, no plans, no disappointments?" "No, I don't remember that, but it sounds like good advice." Dad joined the Corvallis Fire Department, first as a volunteer, then as a truck and ambulance driver, and had side jobs for his days off. In the summer, Mom made pies while Dad worked his shift. We'd deliver them to the station. The men would happily eat, while Dad would taste and give Mom pointers as she perfected her pie baking skills. One Saturday morning, Dad left early in the morning. He returned to take us 3 older kids for a surprise. We got to be in a parade on the fire truck. We also anticipated the firemen's picnic each year, including the kids' fire truck ride with lights, sirens, and all. After being a full-time paid man for 5 years, Dad won Fireman of the Year award in 1960 for using his first aid skills to save the life of a teenager accidentally shot through the chest in a hunting accident. That summer, Dad came home early one day. He had been offered the job as fire marshal, but wasn't sure what to do. It would be a cut in pay working full-time at the station without the income from the side business. He had a look of doubt, maybe even fear on his face. Mom asked if he really wanted to do it. He answered affirmatively. "Well, then you should. We'll make it work." He was Corvallis's first fire marshal at the ripe old age of 27. Dad sometimes piled us into the car, saying he needed to go see a man about a horse. That often meant we were headed to someplace fun. A favorite was Custer's In-N-Out. How many remember Custer's In-N-Out? Oh. curly fries, rectangular hamburgers, and creamy chocolate milkshake. Another destination was to buy milk from a farmer outside of Philomath. We drove down 53rd Street. As we neared the railroad trestle, Dad sped up into the dip under the tracks. Whee! It felt like we were airborne, our version of a Disney ride. Our move to 11th Street was an adventure, spreading out into the 5-bedroom house. Dad had plans for us to transform the empty side lot from the neighborhood dump for grass clippings to a beautiful yard. We leveled and leveled and leveled the big piles of dirt Dad bought after clearing out debris. Our moaning did not dissuade him from having us participate. His vision was rewarded by a yard so beautiful that people often thought it was a park. And Dad played with us. Our dining room hosted the Cary Family Circus. He taught us tumbling that we turned into shows for Mom and the little girls. We had eras of pool and ping pong in the basement, and summer swimming at the high school pool, with Dad embarrassing us by sticking his comb into his chest hair. We had games of softball and kickball in the side yard. He took off time during a big snowstorm once to build snow forts and have a snowball fight with us. No matter how fast we rolled the piles of white, the grass was covered again almost immediately. Snow was so rare for us, and it was so much more fun with him. Dad decided we need to work on our table manners, using our formal dining room. We learned proper comportment. Set the table, use utensils correctly, sit up straight, and converse politely. But Dad sometimes got silly. More than once, putting our dog Cherie's little red ball in Mom's cup of after-dinner Sanka. It was also storytelling time, so many good laughs. Our Dad was fastidious, whether with his hair, painting, packing, shaving, or cleaning. Nobody could turn over soil with a shovel as neatly, or measure with our arm, or stride as accurately. He expected the best effort from us as well. When friends saw how particular he was, no glass left in the sink, no crooked towel, no dishcloth left in a crumple. They asked if he'd been in the Marines. Yes, in the Cary Corps, an exacting line of service. Dad grew the role of fire marshal with his signature skill and integrity. Well, what we remember most are his red fire car, the dispatch radio in their bedroom, and the pungent smell of his turnouts in their bedroom closet. He also worked on the Uniform Fire Code. We remember their trips to Hawaii and the conch shell that Dad would blow. Dad was an avid reader. He had a great speaking and singing voice, attending Toastmasters to improve his speaking, but mostly we remember his singing. He had a good ear and pitch, singing folk songs like The Fox, Tom Dooley, and Old Man Tucker, and crooning Moon River and Mona Lisa. He sang less over time, but his voice stayed good and strong. He had an artistic eye, taking a painting class. He also had great rhythm and put that to use learning how to dance with Mom, practicing in the kitchen. Retiring as fire marshal in 1982, he began a 21-year career as a building code and fire safety consultant, sought out by large companies to assist with fire and building code compliance, continuing to influence the improvement of fire codes through his work. In 1984, Lavern and his second wife, Kathy, moved to 10 acres outside of Sherwood, where he enjoyed raising llamas. He let grandkids drive the tractor. They served amazing meals to us, including wine from their cellar. Their next house on the fast-flowing Santiam River was like a retreat. How did they get anything done there? Dad got involved in Rotary in State Oregon. He loved the friendships and opportunity to serve. However, he surprised us by working on the fireworks sale as a fundraiser. We never got fireworks. Though his last years saw diminished memory and abilities, Dad still peeked through in wit and humor. He still told funnies and stuck his tongue out at Kathleen up to the very end. He looked at books and magazines and was known by his array of cowboy hats. He loved visiting with family, enjoyed meeting his 2 great-grandchildren, and keeping busy. We carry so much of you in our hearts, Dad. we see looks and traits in our children, we will think of you as we enjoy a bowl of ice cream, a big bowl of ice cream, a glass of wine, gaze on the beauty of the state that you love so much, hear Andy Williams singing in the background. When we see a herd of munching llamas or pull over for the lights and sirens of the fire truck, we'll be remembering you.
I know that Lavern and I shared a bond having worked in emergency services together. He is a fireman and I a policeman. Do you know what firemen and policemen have in common? They both want to be firemen. We shared an addiction to the adrenaline and the singular experience of answering the bell when lives are on the line, when nothing else matters but your skill and your experience honed in the heat and the sound and the fury. Firemen do not consider themselves heroes for doing their job. Their greatest act of bravery is accomplished on the day they sign up to take the job. Everything after that is just their duty. It's a remarkable job, and it's my pleasure to introduce these remarkable men who do it. I'm going to start with Bill Albright. Bill started in 1964 as an alarm operator. Next, he became the engineer at the Chintimony station on the 1936 American ladder truck. He then moved downtown and eventually became a captain. At one point, he worked 6 months in the fire marshal's office with Lavern, but decided that it wasn't his cup of tea. He assures us that it wasn't because Lavern was impossible to work for. Bill Albright.
Well, first off, I signed up for a speaking class at the Carouse High School. And after I did my first speech, the teacher came and said, "Bill, you probably better try something else." Like the wood shop or So anyway, bear with me. Lavern joined the Carouse Fire Department in 1952 as an active outside volunteer firefighter. And his duties were that he would go to drills and respond with his private car to the fires and help the other volunteers extinguish the fire. He became a paid firefighter engineer in June of 1955. That put him in the old Graham Fire Station. And if you don't know where that's at, it's where the book bin is now. Of course, his responsibilities changed. He was to become efficient in driving fire trucks, operational fire trucks. He had to take a first aid course to be able to drive the ambulances, and he was also be able to pump these fire trucks. After the move to the new fire station, and this has been covered, he became the first fire marshal. And he was the first fire marshal, and that has been covered in 1960. The one speaker also talked about the financial impact that it had on his family because he was not able to work on his off-day job. And at that time, everybody in the fire service, as far as the paid personnel, had an off-day job to supplement their income. Okay, things really started to happen in 1964. That's when I went to work there. My first assignment was to be an alarm operator. And the alarm center was down in the office area. And in the office area, there was the chief's office, there was the alarm center, and Lavern Cary's office, or fire marshal's office. The fire marshal's office was probably as big as 2 broom closets. There was a desk, there was 2 chairs, and a file cabinet. So I think at that point in time, Lavern was kind of getting anxious to move up. So he applied for a position at the state fire marshal's office. Les Edmondson, our chief at that time, got wind of it. And there was no way in hell that the state was going to take his fire marshal. So, Chief Edmondson did the appropriate thing, made him an assistant chief, fire marshal. He also gave him a raise, and he moved upstairs to the new office where the TV room is. And I've never forgiven him for that. When he moved upstairs, not only was the move great, he was able to hire a secretary and a fire inspector. The first fire inspector was Bob Schmidt. And Bob Schmidt lasted about 3 weeks. He came back on the floor. That wasn't for him. So then, and I don't know how he ever pulled this off, but he coaxed Bill Kelly into coming into the fire marshal office as an inspector. And Bill Kelly lasted and made a real good career out of it because he wound up as an assistant chief fire marshal at Oak Lodge. Then he was able to hire another fire inspector, and that was Vern Hennis. And Vern lasted about 6 months and came back on the floor. That wasn't the direction that he wanted to go. Then he made the mistake of hiring me. So I was up there for 6 months. The positive end of that, and I came back on the floor, the positive end of that was Lavern taught me how to do a good fire inspection. I learned about building codes and fire codes. And I was able to apply that when I became a company officer, when we started company inspections. Last but not least, it's been an honor to be here to speak about Lavern. My thanks goes to the Cary family for doing this memorial for Lavern. And I thank you.
Bill Kelly, you're up next. Bill Kelly, who's 93 years old, started working for the Corvallis Fire Department as a live-in volunteer in 1949. Come on up, Bill. And became a paid employee in 1952. It was during this time that the department was morphing from an all-volunteer to a professional department. He worked his way up the ranks, eventually becoming a captain and one of Lavern's inspectors. In 1977, he became a fire marshal for Oak Lodge, which is now part of the Clackamas County Fire District. So Bill is the guy that knew Lavern when he was a fire pollywog.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be called here to speak a little bit on Lavern's part. And what I wanted to talk to you about was at the beginning when Lavern accepted the job as fire marshal. And some of the little details of that and how things worked out for him. When you're a fireman, you're loved. You come, you put out a fire. You do have the ambulance service. You're helping people. When you're a fire marshal, you no longer wear the white hat because your job then is to, your business would be fire investigation, inspections, codes work, building construction, that sprinkler systems and things that cost people money when they get into business. But it protects the general public. So his job coming in there cold was remarkable. But that guy, he had something about Lavern that when he got a hold of something, he went after it, and he went after it like a bulldog. He was in there. He would go and learn the codes. He was very, as was mentioned, that at that time, the fire department also, to back up a little bit, was primarily volunteer. And the volunteers ran things. We had a pay chief, Chief Tolman, and we had drivers. The rest of the firefighting was done by the volunteers. They pretty much ran it. You know, they had their own captains and so on and so forth. And then the city decided to go from being a mayor and a city council to a city manager. And that's when they decided, with the underwriters and the insurance people, that it was time to get the Corvallis Fire Department paid. That was kind of a tough time in there because it's quite an expense in this sort of thing to hire new personnel. But anyway, Lavern got to be fire marshal, and he spent a lot of his time down in Southern California at the codes research. He's very instrumental in the Uniform Fire Code that he helped put together with many of his other fire marshals in the area there. And he was able to do that. And one thing again, he was at that time, Walt Stickney was the state fire marshal. And he and Walt were very close. It wasn't uncommon, and I think probably Joanne would probably remember, in the middle of the night, if there was a problem that the state fire marshal had Walt Stickney, he'd call Lavern, and they'd talk for hours on the phone, this sort of thing. Anyway, he did very well, and he also, Lavern, represented the West Coast Fire Chiefs Association in the codes work, and got that going, and he was very instrumental. And I wanted to make that known, that he was very good at this, and he's got us where we are today with a very good code. Most of the cities, I think probably all of them, have adopted the Uniform Fire Code that they put together. And so I want to get that. But anyway, other than that though, Vern's a regular family man, as you can tell by what's going on there. He's a good friend. And I have one thing, I don't know if you girls remember this or not. And Doug didn't remember. But I remember Vern. Anyway, for some reason or other, we'd be up in our office, as you mentioned, the fire marshal's office there. We had a secretary. Lavern had his little office there enclosed, and the fire inspectors were out in their desks there. We'd be busy doing our work there, and all of a sudden, all quiet, you hear this big, you know, it sounded like a goat, you know. And I don't know, but I think Lavern had hiccups. So just, you know, and I'll be quiet, the secretary, she's, and then, you know, almost quiet outside, you know, and then she starts to laugh, and then Bob Bernier starts to laugh, and then Doug starts to laugh, trying to suppress everything. I often wondered, but he lasted a long time, so it couldn't have been very serious. Anyway, Lavern he was very popular with the state fire marshal's office, and when Walt Stickney retired, Lavern was politics. He was kind of first in line. Excellent man to replace him, but he wasn't. And I'll let it go at that. Anyway, he was a good man, an excellent fire marshal. I thought the world of him. He brought me into I think what got Lavern's first started, when he first started as a fireman, paid man, we started as a relief man. We worked vacations and things like that, kind of a kick around. And every year, the state fire marshal, deputy, Joe Galt, would come in and we'd inspect Oregon State College at that time. And the extra man like me or Lavern would go along. I think that may be what got Vern involved with the fire marshal's office, this sort of thing. So anyway, that's what occurred then. I won't take any more of your time here because these talks go on and on and on. He was a good fireman, dedicated, and he taught me a lot. And one thing I still remember there, I'd have a problem and ask, I said, Bert, what do you think about so-and-so? He looked at me, Kelly, he says, Kelly, I don't know what the hell to tell you. That was that's it. So, bless his heart. He's a great man. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about him, Bert. He's a great guy. Thank you very much.
Doug, you're next. Doug Van Pelt worked for the Corvallis Fire Department from 1975 to 2002. He started as an inspector and worked for Lavern directly in that capacity for 5 years. He worked his way up the ladder from inspector to captain, assistant chief, and then was chief of the department the last 9 years of his career. Doug Van Pelt.
Hello. Believe it or not, I used to be about as skinny as Bill still is. And why that might be a point to bring up is the last time I saw Lavern, he walked up to me with a big smile and shook my hand, and he said, "I'm so happy to see you're successful enough to afford plenty of groceries." As it was mentioned, Lavern and Chief Fluhop hired me in 1975 to be an inspector. And I'd had several years of experience doing that for an insurance company, but the fire department was a completely new culture. And Lavern took me under his wing, and he was a terrific boss. He was a great mentor, and I can't say how much I learned from him. But one of the first things he did was he had a barbecue at his house, welcomed me and my wife into the community, and introduced me to the other firefighters and some, I think, members of the Rotary Club and so on and so forth. And then I remember when I first started, he said, "Now you need to understand, Oregonians don't like outsiders." I shared a farm background with Lavern. I also grew up on a farm in the Midwest, but I had moved around and I moved here from Seattle, so I was an outsider. And he said, "But the truth is, most of the people here that act that way, they moved here too. But the first thing you got to do is learn how to pronounce things." And he taught me how to say Willamette, because in the Midwest it's Willamette, because there's a university, and how to say Calapooya and Clackamas and things of that nature. And he said, when you get some time, drive around this beautiful state, go to the coast, go to Eastern Oregon, just don't make the mistake of thinking that Bend is anywhere close to North Bend. You're gonna be okay. He had a quirky sense of humor, and we always connected. But at any rate, there's three things that I think defined his talent and his skill. And the first is the fire marshal's office, which was entirely his creation. It was a masterpiece of organization and record keeping. There were records of every building in town, bigger than a threeplex. There were records of all the fire runs, and then a special report for any fire that resulted in a casualty or a death. There were records of people that owned the various different buildings where fires occurred, and records of all the witnesses to all the fires. And this is particularly important because you usually only get on that list once in your life. And if you start showing up 2 or 3 times, maybe the fire marshal ought to spend a little more time talking to you about why you're so unlucky. There were maps and files of photographs, and this was, as I said, completely his creation. All the records were typed on an electric typewriter with carbon copies. I can remember when we got our first copy machine and our first telephone that had more than one line. It was mentioned how meticulous Lavern was. The records, the process was unbelievably organized. Having come from an insurance company, I knew how a bureaucracy could be run. Didn't hold a candle to his organization. All the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. I wondered if it's as accurate today, even with computers. The second thing, of course, is his work with codes and regulations. But what strikes me as most important here is that he took the whole concept through from identifying a need to crafting what's a desired outcome. Well, what can we do to make this better? He would lobby either the city council or maybe go to the state and convince people that these rules ought to be accepted. And then he would write the rules and he'd see it through. But the thing that set him apart is that once it was adopted, he'd be the person that was the face of getting it done. And as Bill said, this isn't particularly fun work. You face a property owner and tell them they've got to do things they don't want to do. It's going to cost them money, interrupt their business, or in some cases even put them out of business. And it's tough stuff, and as been mentioned, not everybody has the muster to keep up with it. He wrote a city ordinance that required every major building to have a sprinkler system in the basement. And this is particularly important because if you have a fire in the basement, you're probably going to burn the building down. And the only way to put it out is to go in the way the fire wants to come out. And so it's particularly dangerous to firefighters as well. And he felt that was extremely important. And he wrote a city ordinance that put that into play. And about the same time, he worked with the state of Oregon to craft a rule that required sprinkler systems to be put in the exits of all the old buildings that were designed poorly. And this all came into play about the same time. So you can imagine this affected just virtually every building in town that was of any size that was very old, including the buildings on campus. And to say there was a resistance was an understatement. And yet, in a matter of a few years, every building met the regulations. And I don't think that could have possibly been done without everybody's belief that he was honest, he was a fair dealer, nobody got a special treatment, nobody got off the hook, everybody was treated the same, and he was a fair dealer. And I can think of several fires that were controlled by the systems that he had put in. At least 2 of them were in the Benton Hotel, and that houses people who have physical limitations and they can't get out on their own. And so we can only imagine what might have happened if those hadn't been in place. The last thing I want to talk about is maybe something that not a whole lot of people got to see or appreciate. Bill and I certainly did. Lavern was a superb fire investigator. Knowing the cause of a fire is essential in taking the steps to prevent them or to identify foul play and prosecute arson. Now, sifting through a burned out building, people can liken it to a needle, looking for a needle in a haystack. And I would add, yeah, if the haystack's all black and covered in soot and it's wet and the roof's gone because the fire burned it off and it's night and it's raining, and then it's a needle in a haystack. To me, it seemed impossible at first, and at the very least discouraging. But to him, it was a challenge, and you could actually see him rise to the occasion. It was a problem to be solved, and he really threw himself into it. And he would stick with it until the job was done, and sometimes this would take days. And you'd see him in his coveralls. If the fire happened in the daytime, he'd put them on over his coat and tie. If it was at night, he'd probably over his pajamas. His tools were a whisk broom and a dustpan, jars to put items that were worth focusing on in, a camera and a notebook. He took a special effort to coach us and train us in the methods, and he stressed patience because he knew that most people didn't enjoy it like he did, and if you found something that might have caused a fire, you were ready to go home. And I remember him saying, our job isn't to find a cause of a fire, our job is to find the cause of the fire. And there's 2 different things. So don't get anxious and go home when you find the first thing. Prove your theory and keep looking and disprove all the others. It was scientific method at work. And if you committed an arson in Corvallis, you stood a much higher chance of getting discovered and prosecuted than just about anywhere else. In closing, this all added up to making our city much safer from fire than most. It's been said, the best fought fires are the ones that never happened. You can't measure how many fires didn't occur or how many were limited thanks to him. He was exactly this sort of public official we want. He was talented, skilled, very honest, and possessed of the highest ethics. And he was reliable, and he was also frugal with the public's funds. We need more people of that caliber today when institutions are being questioned. It was a privilege to work for him and alongside him, and I learned so very much. I'm convinced he saved many lives that we'll never know because of the fires that didn't happen. And for that, he's an unsung hero.
Roger Severson's fire service began the same day he was discharged from the military in 1969. Go ahead and come up, Roger. He served with Santa Barbara County Fire Department for 10 years. He was at the Roseburg Fire Department for 3 years, Office of the State Fire Marshal for 17 years, and he was the Codes Program Manager and Committee Chair for the last 6 years of that time. He also had a private code business for 10 years. He says he's now free to do whatever he wants to, and he's going to speak with us today as long as the Admiral allows it.
Maybe I should qualify that Admiral remark as when we first started retiring from the service of fire business in various forms, we were able to go out and sail a little bit with some small old used boats that we were able to find. And I was the captain, but she was the Admiral. I would also like to tell you a quick story, if I might, before I get into some other comments. And that is, a few days ago, I got an email from what I was told was number 4 daughter, as Teresa described herself. And she asked that we limit our discussions to some time frames. Well, I started thinking, well, that was quite a bit, and being a verbose person that I am, I probably wrote way too much for my bio also. So I was trying to pare that down. Well, in doing so, I'm not very conversant with a new program we have in our computer. And I wrote one line and I hit tab to indent. Well, when I hit tab, it sent the message. So what Teresa received was one line. And what it said was, I've been married to my wife Diane for 48 years. She said she got a chuckle out of it. Glad to see you did too. And I'm thinking my wife got a chuckle out of it. Anyway, about Lavern. Many years ago, and we've already heard many of the people he's worked with talking about his beginnings with the fire code. But way back when, there was, I don't know what the years were, maybe some of you folks do, but there was a need for a fire code that could be used throughout the different states and throughout a state and across lines and be compatible with each other. What they put together in those days in this committee that formed to write this code was the very first of the Uniform Fire Code, as they called it, which had a family with the building codes and mechanical codes and other codes. Well, that code was in effect for over 30 years, and it was also adopted by 27 Western states. And the chair of the committee that was forming all that, if I've got that right, was Lavern Cary. Lavern's skills were known and appreciated and respected throughout the whole country, and I've seen that many times when I was working in my code work, traveling around to different conferences in various places. All I ever heard about, you're from Oregon? Oh, well, you know Lavern. Or I could go back even to where I used to work with in Santa Barbara. Oh, you know Lavern. People knew him everywhere. But we in Oregon, and as was mentioned, I used to chair the fire code committee for Oregon State. But we were so fortunate to have Lavern always in attendance there. He took part of our work in our developing in our codes, and his knowledge, his experience brought a great bunch of success to what we were working on. But I feel anyway, what was more important than a lot of our code work and our careers was the friendship that we developed. That friendship we had grew and went on for as long as time has been since that working days. Kathy, Diane, Lavern, and I, we went to many, many places over to the coast. We traveled up to Forest Grove for Verboort sausage. We've been up the river to picnic out of the trunk of their car. Lots of fun. Went to lots of wine festivals, and Lavern had this very creative and new way of describing a wine if he didn't like it. If it had a bite to it, you know how you've all probably talked about those woody tastes and those little berry hints and things that are in a wine. Lavern called a wine, if it had a bite to it afterwards, it was like cat claws. But it's that kind of humor, his wit, that I really truly enjoyed about Lavern, as well as the other side of Lavern. He was a very stern person at times. He said what he meant what he said, and whether you like it or not, you can expect that that was accurate information. There's an irony, in fact, that I learned later. I didn't know that. Some of you folks all did know that probably early on in Corvallis, but I didn't realize when I first began working in the State Fire Marshal's office, and I got to know a friend of mine there very well. We worked on a lot of code work. We did a lot of code interpretation work. And we became very good friends until his passing some years ago. But that was Bob Burney. And the irony that I found with that was that Bob Burney was Lavern's protege, coming from Corvallis Fire Department. There's a kind of presence I think you all probably sense, and we've all been talking about all day here, about these people. And I know we have a small farm, and when I'm working around there, sometimes I just get the sense that Lavern's going to come driving up at any moment. He often did that. But it was fun, and I enjoyed the fact that we could do that. And we'd go sit on the deck, maybe have a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, talk about insignificant anythings. And it was just that kind of thing about our friendship that I really enjoyed also. But I'm honored at this time to say, as others have truly been honored to be around him, but to be able to call him my friend. He was my mentor. He was often my big brother. But I think a greater honor to me was that he called me his friend.
In their house sat a radio beside their father's bed, and as they grew, they listened to the words it often said. Brave men were sent into the night on another run, and at the last was always said, 10-4.
KOM 941.
As kids, they didn't understand the duties to be done. They only knew on every call was 10-4.
KOM 941.
Eventually, it became a part of them. They thought it was pretty fun to end all of their sentences with 10-4.
KOM 941.
It soon became their secret code. A tradition had begun. If you need them to know that it's okay, answer 10-4.
KOM 941.
So as their dad is laid to rest, they share the code with everyone and ask that you would join them in one last 10-4.
KOM 941.
And now they have a song for you folks. Oh, great.
Style someday. Oh, dream.
On a bright summer day in Pitt, Idaho, where my family spent their summers, my dad and Uncle Orville and Uncle Lavern decided it was time for my brother and I to learn to water ski. Now, it was not so much our idea as it was my uncle's, but it did look like fun, and my older cousins knew how to water ski, and being more like your older cousins was always a plus. So, here's the setup. Uncle Orville in the boat, Dad and Uncle Lavern standing with me in the water, sort of holding me in position, me strapped into a pair of miniature water skis with the noses of the skis tied together with a shoelace. I would bob in the water while I struggled to get set. When everything was just right, or sort of just right, or even just good enough, I was to yell out, "Hit it!" with all the gusto my squeaky, prepubescent vocal cords could muster. As I laid back in the cold water, struggling with the skis, I felt the same thing that everyone who has stepped through a threshold into the unknown has felt. I felt fear. I felt it tingle and race over my skin. I tasted it in my mouth. I saw it as my vision narrowed and then narrowed again. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run away. I wanted it to just stop. But these men were my uncles and my dad. And there was no other men in my life that I wanted to impress more. No one. So I steeled myself against the fear and the cold water and the tug of the rope, and I threw caution to the wind, and I yelled, "Hit it!" And the little boat leapt forward, and the skis pushed into the cold water, carving a trough through it, and my world became that trough. I pulled hard against the rope, and the rope fought back, struggling to break free of my grip, and the muscles down the sides of my back tightened and flexed against the bend of my spine. But somehow, slowly, I began to feel the water beneath me change. I could feel the water transforming itself, becoming more and more solid as we gained speed, lifting me out of the trough. I was doing it! I was going to make it! And then I fell. And all at once it was over. The pull, the fight, the exhilaration, the rope was gone. I could still feel the sting of it on my hands. The little boat was taking a wide arc around me. I looked down at the skis, now awkward and heavy as they hung beneath me in the deep, black water. Now, I wasn't very far out. I hadn't even left our little lagoon, but I'd never been this far out before. I could swim, I was used to the water, but I was used to the friendly water over there near the shore. So I looked to the shore, and I saw my Uncle Lavern swimming toward me. He was a strong swimmer and comfortable in the water. He soon swam up to me and helped me sort out the skis and got me into position. He then moved around behind me and held me against his chest. He felt strong and warm and secure. His hairy chest felt strange against my little boy back. His grown-up man breath smelled foreign as he spoke over my shoulder, telling me to lean back into him and calm myself in the water. He slowly and calmly recited what to do. Lean back. Bring the tips of the skis out of the water. Bring your knees up toward your chest. Brace yourself for the pull of the rope. And once again, I yelled, "Hit it!" And I leapt from my uncle's embrace. Now, I don't really recall how many times it took for me to get the hang of it. The particulars have drifted off to that place where particulars go. All I am left with are the memories of the fear and the fight and the pride, of the wanting to quit and the not quitting, of the strong and quiet encouragement and the suddenness of the leap from my uncle's arms. I can remember it like it was yesterday, because I felt it again when I learned of my uncle's passing. It came back to me vividly, an old feeling that I'd been carrying with me for so long, like a familiar song or the smell of Grandma's house. We often think of death as losing the ones we love. We say they've been taken from us, as if torn from our embrace. But this time, it felt different. It felt right. You see, it wasn't he that left my embrace. It was me that left his. As I was bobbing in that cold water, I was afraid. In Lavern's arms, I felt security, assurity, safety. Out there ahead of me was cold, unforgiving water. Out there ahead of me was most certainly failure. Falling is as much a part of skiing as any other part of it. But out there ahead of me was where I wanted to go. Both of us knew that I could not stay there forever, in the embrace and the warmth with the strong, comforting words spoken in my ear. He knew, and I knew, that he was there, and I was there, to yell, "Hit it!" You want to give it a try? Hit it! To yell, "Hit it!" and leap from his arms. To yell, "Hit it!" and rise to the challenge. To yell, "Hit it!" and pull and strain and struggle and feel again the wind and the water and the exhilaration. Because that way was the unwritten story of my life. And that way was the enduring story of our family. And that way was where he knew I should go. And so we carry on. And as I told my story today, I could see your heads nod and I could see you smile as you remembered your own story of the times this strong and comforting man was there for you, supporting you, encouraging you, helping you become that which you are today. And so today, we calm ourselves. In the cold, black waters of our grief, we lean back into the comfort of each other. And we remember fondly his strength, and we forgive him kindly his weaknesses. And we recognize in each other that we are the lucky ones. We are the ones he loved, and the ones who loved him. And if we listen closely, we will hear his voice in our voices, and we will hear his laugh in our laughter, and we will feel his strength in the strength of each other, and we will carry on. And now we'll do the bell ceremony.
It was the bell that signaled the start of duty, and through the days and nights, each alarm was sounded by a bell. It called the firefighters to fight fires and place their lives in jeopardy for the good of their fellow man. And when the fire was out and the alarm had been completed, it was the bell that signaled its end. We seek strong words and symbols that give us a better understanding of our feelings when we experience a loss. And when we use these symbols and words to reflect that devotion our brothers and sisters had for their duties. The sounding of the bell, a special signal of 5 rings, 3 times each, represented the end of their duties and that they were returning to quarters. And now, Assistant Fire Chief Fire Marshal Lavern Cary has completed his tasks. His duties well done. He has given his best. For our fallen brother, his last alarm, he has gone home. Please stand for the bell ceremony. Uniform personnel, hand salute. Ready? 2. You may be seated.
We direct the path of our spirit according to hours and seasons, life and death. In conceit, we make time a river on whose bank we can sit and watch its passing. A time to be born, a time to live, a time to die. And yet, there is a timelessness in you that recognizes the timelessness in life. So if in your thoughts you must capture time and seasons, let each season encompass all of the other seasons. Let life surround death. Let today embrace the past with fond memory and the future with longing. For we yearn to know the secret of death, but how will we find it unless we seek it in the relentless beauty of life? For life and death are one, even as the canyon and the river are one. And what is it to die but to step from the horizon and melt into the sun? Thank you.